Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Mem Zayin. This week's learning is sponsored by Robert and Paula Cohen in memory of Robert's father, my grandfather, Joseph Cohen, Yosef ben Moshe HaKohen, Zichrono Livracha. Today's daf is sponsored by Racheli Mendelssohn in loving memory of her mother, Shoshana Bat Shraga Feivel, the Rivka. Okay, we're going to get started now with the top of our daf. The Gemara quotes from the end of the Mishnah, Ha'omer lechavero. So let's go back for a quick minute. The Mishnah have recited, we're going to have a pretty simple daf today. We're going to have two questions. First one will be answered. The second one, we're going to bring two attempts to answer the question. Neither is going to be successful. And then we're going to move on to the next Mishnah and only get started with that. So the Mishnah had said, Ha'omer, I'm now on Memvav Amud Aleph, about the middle of the page. Ha'omer lechavero, the last case in the Mishnah, konam lebeitcha shani nichnas. Your house will be forbidden to me. Konam, I will not go into it. Sadcha shani lokech, your field, I will not purchase. So now what happens if the friend dies and it's no longer the friend's? So we already learned, since he says your field, your house, if mate, if that person were to die or sell it to someone else, it's permitted because the neder didn't include that. But if you say, konam bayit zeh shani nichnas, I will not go into this house, not specifying it happened to be your house, but they didn't say your house, then mate acher asur. Even once it leaves your possessions, it will be forbidden. Before we look at what the Gemara has to ask, what Avimi is going to ask, I just want to remind you of some basic laws of vows. I can forbid my own items to myself. I can forbid my own possessions to you, okay? And I can forbid your possessions to me. But what can't I do? I can't forbid by a vow someone else's possessions to you because they're not in my possession to forbid them. So now comes the question. By Avimi asks, konam lebayit zeh she'ata nichnas. What if I say, this house, right, meaning your house, she'ata nichnas, right, that you won't go in, mate, konam lebayit zeh, my house. Sorry, my mistake. Bayit zeh is my house. So I say konam this house. I don't say my house. I say konam this house she'ata nichnas. Mate oshemacharo la'acher mahu. If I die or I sell it to someone else, what happens? Again, if I say your house, but I don't say yours and I say this house when I'm pointing to your house, is forbidden to me. Since I said this house, it's forbidden to me even after you die or after you sell it to somebody else and it's in someone else's possession. Because I can forbid anyone else's property to myself. So the fact that it left your domain and went to someone else's domain shouldn't affect my ability to vow about it. But if I take a vow for you and I say, you can't go into this house, I'm forbidding it because it's mine and I can forbid my property to you. That's able to be done. However, what happens when it leaves my possession? Can I now forbid something that later won't be mine anymore? Okay, so let's just listen to the way they word it. Adam osir davar shebireshuto l'chashiyetze mereshuto o lo. Since it's in my possession now, do I have the power to forbid it even once it leaves my possession? But obviously, if it's not in my possession now, I can't forbid it to you. But can I forbid it to you now while it's in my possession and say bayit zeh, this house, meaning not dependent on whether I own it anymore any further down the road, and when it leaves my possession, is it still going to be forbidden to you? Do I have the power to do that or not? So I'm a Rava. Rava is going to prove it from a source that we saw recently on Daf Mem Bet. Tashma, let's learn it from here. Ha'omer lebeno, konam she'iyata neheneli, umet yirashena. If I say to my son, again, my son is someone else. So I say to my son, konam, that you will benefit from me, meaning that you will not benefit from me. Okay, my objects to you are konam, umet, and then the son dies, yirashenu. So the son will basically inherit it, and that's because it's now mine, but once I die, the son, by laws of inheritance, it goes to the son. But b'chayav u'b'moto umet lo yirashenu. But if I say in my life and in my death, then, right, so I say to my son, konam, my possessions to you in my life and in my death, what happens? Lo yirashena. When I die, the son doesn't inherit. Why? Because I specified that it will be forever. even if it's no longer mine. So what do you see here? Very clearly, shmamina adam oser davar shebershuto lechashiyetze mereshuto shmamina. Now so therefore one can infer from here, I clearly do have the power. If it's in my possession now, I can forbid it to someone even going into the future. And the fact that it's my son doesn't make a difference. It doesn't matter if it's my son, and because we're related, it has no bearing. My son is an independent entity, and therefore it would be considered forbidden. If you remember, we had this, and someone had suggested maybe it's only because you said b'chayav b'moto. Remember, there were these two questions, and one of them on this source was that issue. One of them was on this source, and anyway, they seem to say this is a unique case. But this obviously either doesn't think this is a unique case, or just anyway, even there, if it maybe didn't provide the proof we were looking for, this seems pretty clear that if you make it clear that it's going to be after you, this just shows you have the power to do it. If you have the power to do it, then even if I say bayit should even apply after my death. So according to the way they answer Rav Yimi's question, it seems like you can actually forbid someone else your items that are yours now, but even once they're no longer yours. People have the power to do that. Now comes the next question. Before we get to the next question, they preface it with the following Mishnah, which we're going to see. The Mishnah, I think the Mishnah is, on Daf Nun Zayin. Okay, in another 10 pages, we'll see this. Tanan Hatam, it says there, konam perot ha'elu, it's a similar type question. Konam perot ha'elu, alai. These fruits will be forbidden to me, or konam him alpi, there will be konam to my mouth, or konam him lipi, or for my mouth, okay, either however you translate, lipi, alpi, on my mouth, to my mouth. Either which way, the Mishnah there is going to explain, these are forbidden to benefit from, even though you use the language of to your mouth, but you really, because you say konam, you're basically saying, I can't benefit from them at all. And the question is, what makes this next halacha kick in? There's a debate. We'll see when we get to the Mishnah. Asur b'chilufehen u'b'gidulehen. So if I say these fruits are forbidden to me, okay, it could be because I said perot ha'elu, these fruits. So these fruits include, or maybe because I used the word konam, which sounds a lot like hekdesh, like sacrifice, which is sanctified, which then once something's sanctified, even anything you replace it with is sanctified, and anything that grows from it is sanctified. So therefore, also here, again, it's not 100% clear what about this makes this happen, but it's forbidden. So let's explain what these two things are. Chilufehen means that if I say these fruits are forbidden to me, and I sell them, okay, and I get money for them, or I barter them. Okay, I barter these fruits are nectarines, and I barter them for apples. Okay, so now I have apples in place of these nectarines. They're also forbidden to me, the apples, because that's chilufehen. Or I switched them and I sold them. I got money for them. The money is forbidden to me to benefit. And gidulehen, if I planted them in the ground. Okay, we're going to see later when we get to this Mishnah, the Mishnah is going to say it's more like onions that you plant in the ground and they actually grow, as opposed to the seeds usually getting destroyed. Usually you put a seed in of something and then the seed becomes nothing but or whatever you plant. If you plant a fruit, let's say, the fruit will disintegrate, but you'll be left with, the seed will grow into something. Here we mean when it's an onion and the onion actually grows, the onion that you planted actually grows with the onion. Okay, so you plant a little, we'll talk about it more when we get there, about how the whole thing works, about how planting, etc. Okay, like a bulb. Anyway, the fact is, if I say these words, konam perot ha'elu alai, now again, this is forbidding to me. Question's going to now come, what if I did it to you? So if I say these fruits will be forbidden to me as konam, not only are the fruits forbidden, but if I trade them for something that's forbidden, and if I grow from them and I plant them, also what grows will be forbidden. So by Rami Bar Chama now asks, Amal konam perot ha'elu al ploni, ma'u b'chilufehen. If I say, though, these fruits will be konam for you, so it's obvious to the Gemara, it seems, that the giduli, or to Rami Bar Chama, whatever grows from them will be forbidden, because again, what grows from them still has the original thing that was forbidden in it. So what grows from them is forbidden. What about if I barter for them and I now have other fruits, or I sold them and I now have money? Is that also forbidden to you? Do I have the power? Again, it's all about, I have less power to forbid. My power to forbid to you is more limited than my power to forbid for me. Because I can forbid to me anything in the world, right? And I can forbid to me anything that's mine or yours or anybody's. but to you, I can only forbid my own stuff to you. So the question is, mi amrina, and here are the two sides. Gabe delay, when it talks about your own self, ho'il, now here comes, they're going to make this interesting comparison. Ho'il va'adam oser perot chavero al atzmo, since I can forbid even your fruits to me, adam oser davar shelo ba la'olam al atzmo. I can, now here comes a phrase the Gemara loves, davar shelo ba la'olam. Those apples that I traded my nectarines for are considered halachically something that doesn't exist in this world. Now, they might have existed at the time. Davar shelo ba la'olam could mean two things. Number one, it could mean something that didn't even exist right now. It could also mean something that didn't exist within my prohibition. I prohibited nectarines for myself. I traded those nectarines for apples. The apples is something that didn't exist in terms of my neder, right? It wasn't part of my neder, my vow to begin with. So now the question is, when it comes to me, why do we say the chilufim or asulim? Because just like I can forbid your fruits to me, I can forbid something that wasn't part of this vow to me when I flip it, when I trade it. So those apples don't really exist in the world as part of this neder, but it can definitely be included in my words, again, depending on what wording you use. If you say this wording, konam perot elu alai, or lepi, or alpi, then that includes even chilufei hen. However, gabe chavero, but when it comes to you, since I'm more limited in what I can forbid to you, ho'il ve'en adam oser perot chavero al chavero, since I can't forbid someone else's fruits to you, so maybe I can't forbid things that didn't exist in this world to you. So again, I can't, these apples that had nothing to do with the vow in the first place, I can forbid these nectarines to you, but once the nectarines are sold and traded for apples or for money, or whatever it is, that's something that wasn't part of the neder to begin with. It's considered wasn't part of this world, okay? Therefore, maybe I can't. Oh, Dilma, or do we say, maybe we view chilufin as an outgrowth. It's just like something that grows from it. If I plant it in the ground and it grows, that's going to be forbidden because, right, it's like the original. Now, even an outgrowth is not the original item itself. It's like the original item. We did say it has part of the original item in it, still like the onions that grow with it, but still it's something different, and yet I can forbid it. So if the gidulim are going to be forbidden, then maybe the chilufin are forbidden as well, because there's a similarity between them. They're both, in a sense, outgrowths of the object. The apples are kind of an outgrowth of the nectarines because I've traded them and I've put them in their place, in place of them. So maybe it is part of it. And as I told you before, we're going to have two attempts to answer this question. Both are going to be rejected according to the wording of the Gemara for the same reason, but you're going to see they're each a little bit different, even though we're going to see the wording of the rejection is identical. In each case, it means something a little bit different. Amar Rav Acha bar Menyumi. So Rav Acha bar Menyumi brings the following source. Tashma, let's learn it from here. Ha'omer li'ishto, konam sha'ani neheneh lach. Someone says to his wife, konam, that you will not benefit from me. Basically, he forbids his wife to benefit from him. Again, we've learned this a bunch of times. You can't really do that. Some people say it happened during the betrothal, and therefore it was permitted. So he wasn't yet committed to all the things he's committed, or it depends how you could use a particular language that would work. Okay, I'm not going to get into all those details, but basically forbids his wife to benefit from him. Lova, so now she needs money for food. So what does she do? She borrows money. This is similar to the Hanan and the Bnei Kohanim Gdolim Machlok that we saw both at the end of Ketubot and then the beginning of our Masechet, which was where someone decided, I'll just feed her, and then tries to get the money back from the husband. This is a little different. Some of the commentaries try to compare, but we'll just stick with the case here. If she goes and borrows money, okay, she can go borrow money to feed herself. Let's say it's me. I'm stuck. My husband has forbidden me to benefit. I now have no way to get food. So what do? I borrow money from you. And now you can go, you can go and demand the money back from my husband. So comes the Ran and he explains, because it's not exactly chilufei hen. Okay, well, we'll see why this is chilufei hen. But the Ran says, if you look at the Ran, my time of chovim ba'im v'nifra'in, and etc., so he says, de kasal kadatach kevan de b'sha'a shehi lova misha'abedet nichsei haba'al. As soon as I borrow the money, if you can now demand the money back from my husband, it's as if the money of my husband is now lien to you. You can now go demand the money. And therefore, so as soon as I take the money from you, it's as if I took a chiluf, a barter of my husband's money. It's all connected. I take it from you, you take it from my husband. That ends up being chilufei hen. So therefore, the Gemara says, "My time, why are they allowed to collect the money from you? Lav mishum de chilufin, lav ki gidulin dame. Doesn't it seem like chiluf is not like gidul? Gidul of the husband's items would be forbidden, but the chiluf, which is basically what I'm doing, it's a little bit in the reverse order, and that in the end is maybe going to be the way we understand the Gemara's rejection, because I took the loan out and then it got linked to my husband's money, right? So the Ran tries to say that this all happens simultaneously. And therefore, since the husband's money is automatically linked to the loan, therefore it's as if I benefited from a chiluf of the husband's, okay? That's the Havamin of the Gemara. But Rava rejects this and says, no, this doesn't prove anything. Again, what do we want to prove? Chilufim are not like gidulin, and you actually could benefit from chilufim, because look at this woman, she benefited. To which Rava says, Dilma lechatchilahu dilo v'avid avid. It could be that from an ab initio, this doesn't work. Meaning what? So in this case, what it seems to mean is that since, again, there's different ways, and the commentaries understand this differently, but the simple reading in my mind means that the way, I didn't say this, the commentary said this, but that when I borrow the money, first I borrow the money, okay, as opposed to the Rana tried to link it in the Havamin of the Gemara and what the Gemara tried to suggest. But in the end, the way we really look at it is, I borrowed the money. Only afterwards did you go demand it from the husband. That means this isn't chilufei hen, because lechatchila ab initio, I went and borrowed the money like a regular loan. I wasn't benefiting from my husband. In the end, you took the money from my husband, but that's something different. That's not a direct chiluf. That's the chiluf only happened later. And avid. In other words, if you did it already, right? So lechatchila, you can't benefit. This is I explained the ab initio wrong a little before. It's that this happened later. Okay, the avid means if eventually they got connected, it became a chiluf, that already happened. But lechatchila, you can't do it. In other words, if it was already a chiluf, I wouldn't be able to do it. Okay, if I was forbidden to benefit from my husband's property, he sold some property for money, I took that money, that wouldn't be allowed. Okay, because that would be lechatchila. Okay, but avid here, I took the loan before it was even linked to the husband's money. Afterwards, you demanded it from the husband. It was a done deal. I already benefited before it got connected to, it became a chiluf of the husband. So soon we're going to see lechatchila b'diavad meaning something else, the way we normally use lechatchila b'diavad. Here it seems to mean more that it wasn't really a chiluf, only became a chiluf b'diavad in the end. Okay, in the end it became a chiluf, but it wasn't originally, and that's why I was allowed to borrow the money. So this wouldn't teach you anything basically about what we're trying to get to. Ela tashma, they try again. Ha-mekadesh be'orla ena mekudeshet. This actually isn't a case of a neder. This is a case of something that's forbidden to benefit from. So we're going to compare it to a vow. You can't benefit from orla. Orla is the fruits for the first 3 years they're on the tree. You can't benefit from them. So if a man takes fruits from a tree, okay, we're used to a man betrothing a woman with a ring, but in those days, even nowadays, theoretically, you could use anything that has monetary value. So he takes orla fruit. Now, what's the problem? You can't benefit from orla fruit. So if he takes orla fruit and betroths the woman with the fruit, gives her the fruit, instead of giving her a ring, he gives her the fruit and says, you're betrothed to me, and a mekudeshet. It's not a valid kiddushin. But mecharan v'kidesh b'dmeim, if he took his orla fruit, he sold them and he betrothed her with the money, that's a direct chiluf, okay, where he traded it for money or sold it for money, harei zo mekudeshet. She is actually betrothed from that money. So what do you see? You can benefit from the chilufei hen of orla, which would then mean that you, since that's forbidden to benefit, and in the vow you're forbidden to benefit, it would be the same thing. Sounds like you can benefit from a chiluf. To which the Gemara says, hachanami, same thing here, lechatchila hu dilo. The fact that he did this and it's valid doesn't mean that he's allowed to do it. There's a difference between someone does something and we say, well, he did it already, so it's okay. In other words, he cannot benefit from the hachlafa, let's say. Okay, this is the Gemara's suggestion. You could read this source as say, l'chatchila, ideally, if someone came and asked a question and said, listen, I want to betroth a woman, can I use the money that I traded for my orla money? The rabbi would say, absolutely not. You cannot do that. Okay. So if someone asks a question, a rabbi or knowledgeable person, the answer would be no. That's l'chatchila. Because again, this is trying to say you can't prove from here that you can benefit from chilufehen. Maybe you can't. And the answer would have been no. This was a case where someone did it. Do we say she's mikudeshet though? In other words, is it effective? And the answer is it's effective, but if he did it already, then he did it and the kiddushin is valid. It's a question in the kiddushin. It's not a question in can you benefit from chilufim of things that are forbidden. So therefore, it doesn't prove anything. So here the lechatchila b'diavad is a little different. Lechatchila here means ideally you can't do it, but if you did it, it would work. In the first case, the lechatchila b'diavad is, again, the b'diavad is she already borrowed the money and only later did it become a chilufehen. This was a chiluf from the beginning. It was just a matter of, was he allowed to do the kiddushin or was he not allowed to? But since he did it anyway, it's still a valid kiddushin. Okay, so that's the difference between the two answers, even though the language is exactly the same. New Mishnah. So again, just to review, we started off with a question. Both cases are comparing a case where you forbade something to yourself to a case where you forbid it to someone else. The first related to, if I forbid something to myself and then it's someone else's, and then it's no longer theirs. Okay, so it's still forbidden to me, but what if I forbid something of mine to someone else? When it's no longer mine, do I have the power to forbid it? And the answer was yes, you do. And then the second question became, if I use a particular language, which forbids not just the fruits to me, but also not just the fruits to me, but also what comes out of the fruits, the trades, if I traded it for something, or the gidulim, what grows from them, I can forbid both of those things using a particular language. What if I use that language on someone else? Would the chilufim be forbidden as well? And in the end, we don't really know. We tried to bring two sources to say, actually, they'd be permitted. And then we said both of these sources can't really prove it. New Mishnah, we'll just get started on it. Hareini alecha cherem. We use the language of cherem, which we already learned about cherem. Hold on one second. The gidulim, I'm not reading the whole chat, but I see you're asking about gidulim. Gidulim is going to come up when we learn this Mishnah, Haran, and Daf Nun Zayin. There's a whole discussion about gidulim and how they work, and we're going to deal with that when the Gemara deals with it further on. So I don't know if that's particularly what you were asking. I just saw the beginning of what you wrote, but that we're going to get to. So don't worry about the gidulim just yet. 10 more days, we'll get there. Hareini alayich cherem. If I use the word cherem, if you remember, we had a whole question: is cherem davar in the door, davar ha'asul, and it depends where you lived in the Judea and the Galil. So anyway, the Ran just points out hareini alayich cherem, which is kecherem shel bed hakabaya. What you mean here is like cherem of the temple, as opposed to cherem of the kohanim, which is actually permitted, and then it's davar mutal, as opposed to davar hanador, which is something that's a vow. It's forbidden because of a vow. It has to be forbidden for a vow to even be considered a vow. And Begalil Maire, and it must be, this Mishnah is referring to the people in the Galilee who stam charamim lebed kabayit, who generally, because they weren't near the temple with the kohanim, so therefore generally their vows were to the cherem for the temple. They were dedicating things to the temple, not to the kohanim. Anyway, that's a side point. The question here is, if I use the language of cherem, which definitely means, according to this Mishnah, a vow, okay, not like the people in the Judea, which could have been for the kohanim, which wouldn't be a vowed item. But again, I want to leave that issue aside. If I say, my hareini, I am to you cherem, that means you can't benefit from me. Hamudar asul, so I forbade you. This whole halacha in the beginning of this Mishnah is very obvious. It's just going to be contrasted to the continuation. So obviously, you're going to be forbidden because I forbade you. If I say hare at alai cherem, if I say that you're cherem to me, then hanoder asul, then I am forbidden. Okay, very obvious. And this third line is also very obvious. Hareini alayich alecha v'at alai. If I say you to me and me to you, if I say it in both directions, cherem shneim asulim. Obviously, each of us can't benefit from the other. Now, if each of us can't benefit from the other, ushnehem utarim b'davar shelo lebavel. but we're both permitted to benefit from things that are belonging to the people who came on Aliyah from Babylonia. Okay, what are we talking about? Well, the Mishnah is going to explain in tomorrow's daf what these things are, like the harabayit, like the azarot. Okay, certain things like the pits on the way where they filled up with water, so that when people came on Aliyah Regel, they would be able to drink water on the way. We spent a lot of time in Eruvin and Shabbat and all that. Anyway, what's unique about Olei Bavel? So the Ran says, Mutarim b'davar shel Olei Bavel, shiv kirum Olei Bavel l'chol Yisrael. The Ran says very simply, they turned it into hefker. Public property can be one of two things. Public property can be property that we all jointly own. Like, let's say you give tax to the city and the tax builds public buildings. How is that viewed? Is it viewed that we're all owners? If it's viewed that we're all partial owners and we're forbidden to benefit from each other, then we're each forbidden to get benefit from that building. None of us can go into the building. If this came up with a Beit HaKnesset, that it's joint property of everybody, and then you can't benefit at all. You can't go in. But the Dvarim of Olei Bavel, they specifically made them hefker. They said, these don't belong to anybody. They're ownerless. So, right, there's either joint ownership, which would mean that if we own something joint and I can't benefit from you, then I can't go in there. And then there's ownerless, which nobody owns it. So now the question is, why, first of all, how do we know that Olei Bavel made it hefker? And why did they make it hefker? So how we know, it just seems to be a thing that they knew, and it was a tradition that was passed down. Remember, they didn't live, they lived far after, but not that far after. So maybe it was a tradition passed down that they did this. Tosfot gives a reason, again, take it or leave it, we don't know, but Tosfot gives a reason, which I think you're going to like. If you look at the very last line in Tosfot on the daf, it's in the very small print on the bottom. Lefi shehivkiru, I'm in like the last few words of the Tosfot there. Lefi shehivkiru l'chol Yisrael, v'lo nitanu lahem liot shutafim bo. They didn't allow anyone to have any ownership of it. Why? Le'inyan sheyuchal ha'achad la'atzor chelko chavero. In order to avoid this problem. Basically, and then you would have to say that it was very common that people were taking vows in those days and getting into fights with people and saying, I forbid you to benefit. And they wanted to make sure that people, imagine, right, if you couldn't go to the temple, or you're walking to the temple and you can't drink from the wells on the way to the temple, you're in pretty bad shape, right? It's going to prevent you from, it was so important to them. They wanted everyone to have an equal share in going, that they didn't want to end up with a situation if someone vowed that their friend not benefit from them, that people wouldn't be able to do this. So they specifically, with Hilchot Nedarim in mind, right? This was a totally Hilchot Nedarim related reason that motivated them. Again, this is Tosfot. I'm not sure if this is the only reason. But he basically says, in order to avoid these kind of problems, the rabbis or whoever it was at the time, probably Ezra and Nehemiah, decided that we're going to make all of this ownerless. And that way we won't have any issues when people vow against each other. Just interesting to think about. It's a possible historical answer, again, since we don't have good evidence of what motivated them to make decisions that they made at the time. All we have is evidence that they have kirum. I didn't have a chance, actually, to look at Mishnah Eretz Yisrael. That would be a good place to look also about if he has any history about this. Hopefully by tomorrow, I'll take a look and I'll see if he says something about it. Why these Olei Bavel had it, the things that they kind of took over when they came back to Israel, why they decided to make them hefker. Okay, so again, the concept being there's two types of public property that's owned by everybody, or public property that nobody actually really owns. With that, we'll finish for today, and we'll pick up from the middle of this Mishnah tomorrow's daf. Shavua tov, everyone.